I was interested to find that this year, a New York newspaper was doing another in a series of articles about U.S. inmates who are condemned to execution. You know that before you die, what do they offer you? One last meal, right? And it's not just the United States, but other countries do the same thing. And so these meals, believe it or not, have been studied. Okay? Americans will study anything and everything. And so one news account said this, just kind of choosing three interesting meals. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, requested 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream as his last meal before he was executed. Serial killer Ted Bundy, he wanted steak, eggs, hash browns, and coffee. Stacy Lamont Lawton, who was convicted of murdering 47-year-old Dennis Price in Texas, he asked, get this, a jar of dill pickles. But overall, this is what they found. They found that most people wanted something that was high in meat and calories. Okay? Average calorie count of their meals, can you believe it? 27,000 calories. Now, how many calories do they recommend that we take in each day? Yeah, about 2,000, right? Give or take. These guys want for their last meal all these calories. And so it seems to me like these inmates are looking for a bit of comfort before death through these meals. Okay? So they choose the comfort foods, they choose the high fat, and they choose the multiple calories because, hey, it doesn't matter anyway, right? So anyway, that's what's happening. Well, today we're looking at a very special dinner, a special meal that Jesus put together for his followers. The most commonly known name for this meal is what? I think I heard it, the Last Supper, right? Now, which gospel writer gave us that name? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Or could it be Paul? Don't think too hard. This is a trick question. It does not appear in the Bible. Okay? Maybe it came from Leonardo da Vinci. Probably even before that, they used that term. And so this is something that was given, and maybe it was given in popular thinking because it was indeed the last meal of Jesus before he was about to be executed. But the actual cause for the meal was because it was part of a national holiday. Just like we're going to have a national holiday, Thanksgiving, coming up, right? And so this was in conjunction with the Jewish festival of the unleavened bread, and during that time they would take the Passover. And yet it wasn't for Jesus and this event, not just because it was a national celebration. It wasn't just because he was looking for some personal comfort. We're going to look through this passage, and as we take the presentation of this passage the way Mark does it, we're going to find out that he is trying to communicate something even more than those two things. Okay, so I want you to just follow along with me, and I want you to be looking for the clues that should help you as we read through, starting from Mark chapter 14, verse 12. And we're going to read it through all the way through verse 31. So I'm ready to begin. And on the first day of unleavened bread, when they had sacrificed the Passover lamb, his disciples said to him, "Where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the master of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready, there prepared for us. And the disciples set up, and they went to the city, and found it just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. And when it was evening, he came with the 12. And as they were reclining at table and eating, Jesus said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. They began to be sorrowful and said to him one after another, is it I? He said to them, it is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the dish with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Verse 22. And as they were eating, he took bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to them. Sound familiar? And said, take, this is my body. Verse 23. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank of it. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I say to you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of heaven. Verse 26. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. And after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even though they all fall away, I will not. Jesus said to him, truly I say to you, this night before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, if I die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said the same. Well, as the title asks, is this a Thanksgiving meal, a last meal, or something else? And that something else I wrote down, gave it away, is love feast. Okay? Let me ask you, as far as Thanksgiving meals, are you going to be at a Thanksgiving meal this November? Yeah? Okay. Now, a Thanksgiving meal, yes or no? Is it like a birthday party kind of a thing? To commemorate, to remember, to celebrate something from the past? Sure. It was to celebrate the survival of the people who first came to start this nation. When we have, on a personal level, a meal, a birthday meal, it is also a Thanksgiving. We have achieved another milestone, another year of progress from the time we were born. And so for them, it was a Passover. How about last meal? Do you think that Jesus was looking for some peace from these people, from his followers? You know what the origin of the last meal is? It started way back as a kind of superstitious meal, okay? What happens is this. By the state offering a last meal and by the prisoner accepting the last meal, what was being communicated was that this was the end of hostilities. This was a token of peace. And by taking this, the condemned person says, okay, this ends it, after I'm dead, I'm not going to send my ghost back to haunt you. Okay? So this is the origin. Well, certainly, this is not what Jesus is intending, and he wasn't getting much in the way of comfort. But there are clues about what Jesus was intending, and they really stick out. And so let's look at this thing that I'm saying is more of a love feast. If this was primarily about the Passover, it would have been presented very, very differently. When you have the Passover, there are certain foods that are essential, that you have to eat. And they all have meaning. Now let me ask you, when you have your Thanksgiving, what is it you got to have? Turkey? Some of you have turkey? Somebody else have something else? Yeah, okay. Yeah, for me, it would be the stuffing and the dressing. Okay? Sweet potato? I didn't even think of that. I forgot about sweet potato. Corn. Okay. Anybody going to say string bean? Pumpkin pie, yeah. It just wouldn't be for you a proper Thanksgiving meal without that item, right? So for the Passover, there was a special unleavened bread, bitter herbs, wine, a special sauce, and most importantly, what did they eat? What animal did they eat? A lamb. Okay? No turducken at this feast. Okay? It would be a lamb. And each one of those things had a special meaning. Mark doesn't even bring up any of those items. In fact, when he starts this whole thing in verse 17, he begins right in the middle. It says, and it was evening, and he came with the 12. And verse 18, they were reclining at the table, and they were already eating when he breaks in with what Jesus is going to be talking about. Now, when you read this, it's so different from when we do communion, how we select the verses about the bread and the juice. What does he intersperse? What does Mark intersperse into this presentation of this launch of the communion meal? Yeah, a lot of talk about the betrayal. What a downer. Last meal together, right? And you're going to talk about all this ugly stuff. Very inappropriate. And you know, he doesn't just talk about it once. He talks about it over and over as if Jesus is not going to let it go. And even more, he keeps narrowing it down. First, when he says one of you, and they all get upset, all right? And they're saying, not me, you know, could it be me? Tell me, Jesus, it's not going to be me. And then he gets more specific. He says, one of you 12. Then he says, one of you 12 here who's eating with me. And so it becomes just beyond question that it's going to be a very sad thing. And as they were listening to this, you can imagine the disciples feeling stabbed in the heart to hear something like that and worried that it might be me. Imagine at a wedding, and the pastor's standing there and he's giving his charge to the wedding couple. I would never do this. But what if a pastor or the officiating person says, well, you know what? Based on your psychological profile and based on statistical averages, one of you will betray the other during the marriage. Wow. And then the guy says, and I looked at your psychological instruments that you took, and I know which one of you will do it. You know, it was kind of hitting them kind of the same way as Jesus is revealing this. And so it's causing this stir. And they're saying, you know, you can't mean me. And yet, by the time we get to the end of the story, how many of these people does Jesus include? All of them. Verse 27. Every one of them. At which point, Peter says, no, not me. Even of everybody, not me. Exclude me. Well, is Jesus just being a party pooper? I want you to look at one particular verse in this presentation, and I want you to see a special word. Take a look at verse 24. 24. What word is it that is very special? That's all right. You don't get marked down for guessing or guessing wrong. Yeah, covenant. Okay? Covenant is a special word. Jesus is saying this is to mark the beginning of a new covenant. One of the other gospel writers uses the phrase a new covenant. And later on, when we hear Paul talking about this, he uses the phrase new covenant. Now, I got to explain something, because covenant is not an idea Americans get very easily. What's the word we always hear? Contract, yeah. We always talk about contracts. And there is a world of difference between a contract and a covenant. A contract is good only as long as both parties are keeping it. And if one party breaks the contract, then the other one is set free from any obligation. So these things are interdependent on both people keeping it. Okay? Now, a covenant is more like a promise. In fact, it's a pair of one-sided promises that's made to do something that follows through. And so it's based more on me keeping my word, my living up to my integrity and maintaining my honor. And so the promiser will announce his obligation, and he will follow through regardless. And so go back to that same wedding example, okay? And you got the officiant has said, one of you will betray the other. And one spouse says, well, you know what? I think it's going to be me. I know I'm really basically a weak person, and I have problem with self-control. And so, yeah, it could very well be true. Suppose the other partner says, you know what? Based on what you've said, based on what the officiant said about the psychological profile, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be faithful. I'm still going to be your spouse. I will not let it change our relationship. Wow. Can you imagine the impact on the other spouse? I will be faithful because I said so. Can you imagine somebody saying that and doing that? And yet, in the Old Testament, there is a man with a book named after him. His name is what? Hosea the prophet. And he is told by God to do exactly that. To take a woman whom the likelihood is she's going to be unfaithful, and in fact she is. And after giving her his good name, she repeatedly cheats on him in the worst way. And he repeatedly comes and takes her back. And so at this point, Jesus is saying, you know what? This is the way it's going to be for us in our relationship. That no matter what happens, you don't have to worry. You will be supported. You will find my commitment unchanged. Well, you hear that, and you can have various reactions. And I want to talk about the positive reactions in a covenant. Some of them make it and they truly mean it. Some of them make it and it really doesn't quite stick. Some will say, oh boy, for me, this is a license to steal, right? So they don't really get and appreciate the kind of loving commitment that's been made. There is the other who says, wow, this is so great, I'm going to do my very best to keep up my end. If it kills me, I'm going to try. The first one, remember in grade school when your friend made you promise and he says, I don't trust you. I want you to raise your right hand and swear. Remember? You guys didn't do that when you were young? Yeah, you had the pinky? Well, we did it the hard way, the whole hand. But see, behind our back, we would have what? Our fingers crossed. Yeah, toes crossed. We found all kinds of ways of breaking that promise, right? And cheating on that promise. See, the person who sees it as a license to cheat doesn't get it and will basically be doing that. What does it take to be able to say, I will do my very best and I'm going to really try to keep this? Well, in law, we had something called legal capacity. If you did not have legal capacity, you could not enter into a contract. So if you were drunk, if you were unconscious, okay, if you were mentally diminished in some way, you would not legally be tied to a contract. We too, as humans, we don't have the spiritual capacity to really get that kind of love, to really see it with such clarity and such conviction that we will truly be those who will be able to be strong and really mean it, unless the Holy Spirit comes and helps us to see it. Example of those who didn't get it, who ate with Jesus that night? Judas. And so he went through the experience, and he never got it. But the others got it. And Jesus, finally, to reassure them, at the end, says to them, very tangibly, he says, I'm going to be resurrected, and after I am raised up, what is he going to do? We'll get back together in Galilee. We're going to have a reunion, and I won't want you to be afraid and of your failures. You can know that my love will be true. How many guys saw the USC game last night? A lot of you did, okay? One of the things that went on was this. The players expressed their love for their coach. And the phrase they kept using was, we want to run through a brick wall for Coach O. Okay? Run through a brick wall for Coach O. When Peter says, not I won't betray you, I think that's what he was trying to say. He started to get it. The others started to get it. And they says, no, we're not only not going to betray you, we're willing to run through a brick wall for you. Well, we know the story. They did not run through any brick walls for Jesus. But Jesus ran through the brick wall for them. This is what the covenant is about. And so Jesus uses this Passover meal to set up this one-sided partnership of love that persists, of love that doesn't diminish, a love that's going to be victorious. And he tells them ahead of time to give them the TLC, the tender loving care that they're going to need, so that in spite of their failure, shame and guilt won't keep them from showing up in Galilee to meet with Jesus. Amazing, huh? That is great love. And so, let me close with 3 questions for us. Number 1, have I come to the point where I want this kind of relationship of love from Jesus, where we want this partnership? If you have not done that, you can say, God, I want that. I want to participate in this covenant. Second, I want to ask this. Have you fallen off the horse? Have you failed in your relationship? If you made some promise to God and you did not keep it, and you've always felt mortified and disappointed at yourself for this failure, remember, Jesus says, I knew ahead of time, and I want to rendezvous with you. I want our relationship to continue, as always, unbroken by your failure. Third thing, each time when we come to our communion service and we read or say that phrase, do this in remembrance of me, what Jesus is wanting is that we will put ourselves right into that upper room, right on that night, and hear his love and his promise, and feel it like Peter and the rest of the disciples. Those are the 3 things, each category of people. This is his time to start his love feast. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's hard to get without the help of the Holy Spirit. We're going to ask our band to come on back up.